Hi folks, my name is Phil and welcome to Grounded, the series which looks at airlines of yesteryear. This episode will take a look at XTRA Airways. While this is a standalone episode, I do recommend watching the previous episode which looked at Casino Express in order to get a full backstory. XTRA Airways began life in the mid-1980s as Casino Express Airlines. With a growing fleet of Boeing 737-200s, the company operated special gaming charters to fly gamblers to the company's casinos in Elko, Nevada. Casino Express grew rapidly through the 1990s, but by the early 2000s had begun to shift focus away from the gaming charters in favour of operating executive charters for sports teams and corporate clients. In July 2005, Casino Express, along with its parent company, TEM Enterprises, was sold by the family of the airline's founder, Todd McClaskey, who had passed away 2 years prior. The two were sold to a partnership of CXP Management and the Avion Group, formerly known as Air Atlanta Icelandic. In October 2005, it was announced that the Casino Express name was to be dropped, with the airline being rebranded as XTRA Airways from that December. It was also announced that the Red Line Casino Charter Programme, Casino Express's Raison d'Etre, would be terminated from February 1st, 2006. The Boeing 737-200s were phased out over the winter months as more modern aircraft were brought in. Avion's ownership allowed XTRA Airways to draft in aircraft from its newfound sister airlines. A Boeing 737-400 arrived from Islands-Flug, and an ultra-modern 737-800 transferred for the winter from Britain's XL Airways. As part of the rebranding to XTRA Airways, the airline needed a new livery. It dropped their smart and simple white with stripes livery and instead used the XL Airways livery as a base. They would retain the white and blue aspects of the livery, but use a garish green for the tail logo, which consisted of just the letters XA. A single 737-800 was placed with XTRA for the winter season and would head back to the UK in May 2006. The 737-400 fleet, however, grew quickly, with one aircraft arriving in November 2005, then one in January and another in February. I should take this opportunity to point out that those three aircraft were formerly at TF-ELJ, TF-ELP and TF-ELV, all of which I worked on during their time at Islands-Flug in 2005. Small world and all that. While XTRA Airways retained their corporate offices in Elko, Nevada, they would move their base of operations away. They would split their operations between nearby Wendover, Nevada and St. Petersburg, Florida. The logic behind this was that XTRA was picking up a lot of vacation charter work along the East Coast, so it made sense to have a base nearby. With their final Gamblers charter flight behind them, XTRA Airways would develop a strong reputation as a specialist charter operator, offering a variety of ACMI services from spot hire to a more scheduled service. The airline also established partnerships with various tour operators including TravelSpan, Vacations Express and TNT Express. XTRA would operate regular charter flights to vacation destinations on behalf of these companies, having been awarded the rights to operate international services to Mexico, Costa Rica and the Dominican Republic. In January 2007, XTRA Airways began operating flights on behalf of Western Airlines. No, not that one. This one was a newly formed company cashing in on the old Western name. Western would be based in Bellingham, Washington, and had set out to be a paper airline until it could obtain its own certification. XTRA would operate a single 737-400 on behalf of Western, with the inaugural flight taking place on January 18th. It was a very short-lived venture, however, with the airline ceasing operations less than 3 weeks later on February the 7th. That would not be XTRA's only foray into the paper airline market, as that same year XTRA would begin operating flights for Direct Air. Officially named Southern Sky Air Tours but doing business under the name Direct Air, the company would charter aircraft from numerous operators and have them operate flights on their behalf. Direct Air had turned to XTRA Airways after their most recent operator of choice, Sky King, had terminated the contract due to lack of payment. I should quickly mention that Sky King came back for seconds a few years later, but that didn't work out again. XTRA would have more luck than Sky King and would operate a handful of aircraft for Direct Air over the next few years, with the latter still bringing in aircraft from other airlines to supplement their fleet. Whilst operating for Direct Air, XTRA's 737s would visit a variety of countries including Honduras, Guatemala and Puerto Rico, as well as numerous domestic destinations within the US. 2007 would also see a change in ownership as the Avion Group's stake in XTRA was acquired by the XL Leisure Group. This was due to the XL Leisure Group undergoing a management buyout, with XTRA being included in the deal as Avion wanted to focus entirely on its ACMI and cargo operations. This change in ownership would be reversed soon enough when the XL Leisure Group imploded in September 2008, with Avion picking up the scraps, amongst them XTRA. In December 2008, XTRAirways refreshed their livery, opting to swap the light blue for a darker shade, as well as trade the garish green for a shade of gold, along with a few other small tweaks. The new livery looked very smart, and in my opinion was a big improvement on the older scheme, and for an airline trying to focus on executive charters, would help them look the part. By the spring of 2012, the relationship between XTRAirways and Direct Air had deteriorated considerably. This was due to Direct Air repeatedly being late in paying XTRAirways for their services. On March the 12th, after stiffing XTRA on the bill one too many times, XTRA pulled the plug and cancelled their Direct Air program. By this point, XTRA was the primary operator for Direct Air, and as a result, Direct Air was forced to suspend operations. Direct Air issued a statement claiming that it was a fuel supplier which had cut the airline off after they missed a payment. They also went on to say that they would suspend operations while they restructured and planned to resume flying in 2 months. This of course didn't go to plan, and within 2 months Direct Air began Chapter 7 liquidation proceedings. Despite XTRA having a very valid excuse for terminating their agreement with Direct Air, the US Department of Transportation went after XTRA for cancelling the flights at such short notice, handing them a fine of $300,000. It was later revealed that XTRA had also not been paid in advance for its services, instead operating flights and being paid in arrears, which is a big no-no for that kind of charter work. XTRA was also deemed at fault for not checking up on Direct Air to make sure that they had the finances to continue chartering their aircraft. Fortunately for XTRA, the DOT didn't hit them with another fine. XTRAirways had taken a pretty big hit thanks to the Direct Air debacle. However, it had carved itself out a nice little slice of the private charter business, and this helped to keep XTRAirways in business, unlike Sky King, who quickly entered Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. XTRA did have its own close call with disappearing, however, as it found itself nearly acquired by a new startup airline. The newly revived PEOPLExpress Airlines had looked at acquiring XTRAirways in order to bypass the lengthy certification process and instead use XTRA to form the basis of the new airline, with XTRA then being rebranded as PEOPLExpress. The due diligence process revealed that XTRA wasn't in the greatest of financial positions, however, so the deal didn't go through. PEOPLExpress would instead charter flights from Vision Airlines, though they would barely last 3 months before giving up and ceasing operations. XTRAirways was once again brought in to assist in the resurrection of a dead airline when it reportedly reached an agreement in principle to supply 737s to Air Florida. Yes, Air Florida. You know, Western were reasonably liked, and PEOPLExpress were certainly missed, although often still griped about. But when most people hear Air Florida, they think of the arse end of a 737 poking out of an icy Potomac River. In an effort to cash in on the 1980s nostalgia wave of the mid-2010s, this new incarnation of Air Florida was to be based in St. Petersburg, and aside from the 737 fleet, would also operate McDonnell Douglas MD-11s on flights to California. You know, this really sounds like some avgeek fantasy. Anyway, nothing ever came of it, other than wasting everyone's time, ours included. Thanks to its part owner, the Avion Group's background in ACMI leasing, XTRA was able to find other revenue streams by operating aircraft for other airlines. XTRA would place aircraft with One Airlines of Chile and Bahamas Air of, well, the Bahamas. 2 aircraft were sent to Chile during the winter of 2013, where they would remain until the following spring. The Bahamas Air contract was an extension and development of a deal from the spring of 2012, and for 2014 would see XTRA operating even more flights on their behalf. XTRA would operate charter services between Freeport and Baltimore, Richmond and Birmingham, or should that be Birmingham, Alabama. Despite the extra revenue stream from the ACMI work and its charter business, XTRA had found itself struggling. It had begun to stagnate, having reduced its fleet to just 3 aircraft, 2 of which had just returned from Chile. Running low on cash and in dire need of restructuring, XTRA's holding company, TEM Enterprises, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. My thoughts on Chapter 11 are well known, but both XTRA and TEM were able to restructure their debt and allow the airline to continue operating as a going concern. A full-on rescue soon came in the form of Airline Holdings, who acquired XTRA for an undisclosed amount in December 2014. Airline Holdings were part of Air Sale Incorporated, who were, and still are, an aircraft maintenance, repair and leasing company. Airline Holdings also happened to have recently acquired the bankrupt Sky King, and thus brought the 2 direct air casualties under common ownership. The new owners focused on XTRA Airways, seeing it as a viable carrier and set to work with some major changes. The airline rebranded as XTRA Airways in the spring of 2015 and quickly followed this up with a completely new livery of red, white and blue. New life was injected into the fleet too. Thanks to AirSale's involvement, several Boeing 737-400s were brought in, either to supplement the existing fleet or to allow a few of the older birds to leave. 2 Boeing 737-800s would also join that May as XTRA's future looked bright for the first time in years. XTRA had previously relocated its headquarters to Boise, Idaho a few years earlier, but now its corporate offices were shifted once again, this time to Florida. XTRA would move into Airline Holdings offices in Coral Gables, near Miami Airport. As part of the move, XTRA would also establish a new operations control center, which included flight dispatch, maintenance control, flight crew scheduling, and flight logistics support. Sky King would also relocate alongside them, having rebranded as Songbird Airways, though Sky King didn't have a fleet anymore, having handed theirs over to XTRA. In 2015, XTRA would be the carrier of choice to haul the band U2 around North America as part of their worldwide Innocence and Experience tour. A Boeing 737-400 was painted up specially. Well, I say specially, but it was a mostly white scheme, though the tour logo did feature prominently on the tail. It was XTRA's impeccable safety record which had helped them secure this prestigious contract and would again be key in securing even bigger private contracts. In 2016, XTRA was contracted by the Democratic Party to provide aircraft for the Clinton-Kaine campaign ahead of that year's presidential elections. XTRA would provide 2 aircraft, a Boeing 737-800 and a 737-400. Both would wear special branding and be used to fly both the P and VP candidates on their whistle-stop tour of the US. The 737-800 would be used by Hillary, with Kaine relegated to the older 400. Still, it could have been worse. One of their rivals in a 737 from a resurrected Eastern ended up off the runway in New York. Hilldog didn't win that year, but XTRA Airways certainly did. Thanks to their high-profile work, XTRA was looking better than ever. The carrier was securing more and more charter work and its fleet was growing and growing. By 2017, the fleet stood at 11 aircraft, 7 737-400s and 4 737-800s. In May that year, the longest serving of XTRA's 737-400s, November 43 X-Ray Alpha, left the fleet and headed for a new life down under as a freighter in Australia. This was, of course, my old friend Victor from Islands Flug, and I just had to mention that. So things were going great for XTRA, but of course this is grounded, so we know it's not going to end well. Despite XTRA's continued success, a huge spanner was thrown into the works when in early 2018, Airline Holdings decided it no longer wanted to keep the carrier. There had already been some light pruning of the fleet during the winter months, however come the spring, 7 of XTRA's 737s left for new pastures, leaving the carrier with a single 737-400. The departing aircraft found a new home with fellow Miami-based charter carrier Swift Air, not to be confused with the Spanish-based Swift Air. Swift Air, now known as Avelo Airways, picked up the aircraft along with XTRA's flying program and business contracts. A small irony here is that Swift had previously acquired the assets from the resurrected Eastern and of course XTRA's close call with PEOPLExpress. The sole remaining aircraft in the XTRA Airways fleet was November 688 X-Ray Alpha, A Boeing 737-400 built in 1990 and had seen service with a handful of airlines including the recently covered XTRA Airways of Spain. The aircraft was retained purely to keep XTRA ticking over as it allowed the carrier to retain its operating licenses, the lucrative paperwork which would make it attractive to anyone looking to launch their own airline and avoid all of that red tape that goes along with doing it from scratch. XTRA wasn't on the market for long, as in August 2018 the carrier was acquired by Western Air Holdings, a vehicle led by Andrew Levy, the co-founder and former president of Allegiant Air. Under the new ownership, XTRA continued to operate their sole 737 on sporadic flights as a mere placeholder until Levy & Co. could get their new plan into action. On February 20th, 2020, XTRAirways operated its last 737-400 flight, with the aircraft ferried to Roswell, New Mexico. The following day, a Boeing 737-800 joined the fleet. Again, this was just to keep the carrier ticking over. Despite the COVID pandemic striking with impeccable timing, it failed to scupper the plans for XTRA. Instead, it brought them a bit more time to refine the plan. XTRAirways would be rebranded as Avelo Airlines and become a genuine scheduled carrier rather than a charter carrier. Avelo would operate as a form of ULCC or ultra-low-cost carrier, favouring quieter secondary airports over the larger, expensive and congested ones. The new airline would open its first base at Burbank's Hollywood Airport and plan to serve 11 routes unserved by competition, with eyes on potential new routes and bases. The Federal Aviation Administration approved Levy's plan in November 2020, and from then on the race was on to begin operations in just 6 months. Avelo would grow their fleet in the meantime and would have 3 Boeing 737-800s by their April launch date. The new aircraft would of course sport Avelo's striking new livery of white and purple with billboard titles. After 34 years, the airline's call sign of Casino Express was dropped, though the 2-letter IATA code of XP remains. On April 28, 2021, Avelo Airlines operated its inaugural flight, and while their story is just beginning, the Casino Express and XTRAirways one ends. Thanks for watching. If you have any comments, suggestions or criticisms, please do get in touch. If you don't have a YouTube doodah, don't worry, I've got a contact form on my website, and I'm also on Facebook and Twitter. I have plenty more episodes in the works, so if you haven't already, why not subscribe to Catch the Mislay Land? And as always, thanks for watching.